There are two truths in this world. One, everyone is going to die. And two, you are more courageous than you could ever imagine. These are the two truths that the Sheep Detectives attempts to cover. And it does so beautifully. Going into this movie, I imagined that the Sheep Detectives would be silly. And spoilers, it is a silly movie. It is wildly immature at times, and some of the sheep are irritating. They're aggravating of how unserious they are. Even some of the townsfolk are wildly inept at their jobs, but that doesn't deter them from being courageous. And if there's one theme that the Sheep Detectives does really well, is showcase that you need to be courageous for the ones you love. Because the fact that everyone dies is a very uncomfortable truth to cover. So, when their shepherd, Hugh Jackman, this wonderfully loved character who everyone seems to adore, dies at the start of the movie, the sheep now have to take the responsibility to take everything that they've learned from George reading the detective novels and put it to good use. This causes the sheep to do things they never imagined doing. One, leaving their barn, leaving the field, crossing a road, venturing into another shepherd's field, and just get together as a close knit family to develop their flock into something larger than they thought. And therefore, when the sheep go out of their way to be courageous, they do so and honor the memory of George by finding the proper murderer and changing their flock into a larger family. Even being courageous enough to bring in the winter sheep as part of their flock. So the fact that they bring in the winter lamb at the end of the movie is very sweet. Honestly, the fact that they named him George after Hugh Jackman's character was so touching, and the final shot of seeing the cloud form into the sheep was beautiful. It was tear inducing. It was probably one of the best parts of the movie. And because the sheep choose to be courageous and include the winter sheep as part of their flock, something that regularly occurs in nature, which is traumatizing to imagine that these sheep born in winter are just neglected by the rest of their flock, even their parents, is very heartwarming. And it showcases just how much courage we need to have when including people who are different from us. Because winter sheep naturally in nature are usually harder to raise. They might be born a little bit weaker and they might require a little bit more help, but to abandon them is just a travesty. It is so important to include sheep who are differently abled than you are. And I think that message of the movie is done very beautifully. Even though they ignored that dang sheep way too many times to the point where I was like, I hate all you sheep. Be nice to this one. I hate this discrimination. At the end of the movie, I loved it, and I love to see that winter sheep be included, especially after the other winter sheep, Sebastian, grew up to be not necessarily a part of the flock, but admits that he does see them as part of his flock on his last moments. One of the things that really frustrates me about this movie is the idea that the sheep don't want to handle serious topics. They would rather count to three, blink, and forget any memory of anything hard and troublesome happening. When George dies, when they see that they're going to be part of a flock that ends up being eaten by people, they choose to just forget the dark moments. And when they choose to forget, they are doing an absolute disservice to the memory of those they lost. And the movie touches upon that when the sheep that remembers everything tells the main sheep, Lily, that to keep them alive is to remember them. And that is what it means to be courageous. Courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is the idea that you do have fear and you choose to do it anyway. It is uncomfortable to think about death. It is uncomfortable to remember people who have died. But taking it upon yourself to remember these people who have passed, these people you have loved with all your heart, takes a tremendous amount of courage and does such a service to their memory. So when Lily chooses not to forget and transform her grief into something positive, into something actionable, that showcases the right idea that children should be learning when it comes to handling their grief. And not just to forget and be cowardly when it comes to these very serious topics. Because believe it or not, we do have a bit of a crisis now in our society when people don't want to be uncomfortable. I've heard this quite a few times from people. Oftentimes, people don't want to watch anything sad. They don't want to confront anything that would make them uncomfortable, make them scared, make them feel different emotions than they are used to on the day to day. So they end up zoning out. They end up forgetting. They end up just coasting through life and living just peacefully. But the problem is, life does not let you just live peacefully. Everyone in their life is going to experience some form of grief, some form of hardship, and some form of uncomfortableness. And so when the sheep choose to remember, it is telling its audience that to be uncomfortable is not a burden, it is not a detriment to you. It is what you need to be in order to grow. And that is the best part of the movie because, to be honest, these sheep are absolutely aggravating. Lily and the rest of the sheep are so annoying at times because they haven't grown up yet. They haven't realized the importance of honoring people's memories and the importance of inclusion and so many more adult themes. So then when they get to something like the road, they freak out. They don't even know what to do. But the truth is, you just have to do it. They didn't need to cross the road just to prove themselves. They needed to cross the roads for their loved ones. Even the main police officer is wildly uncomfortable with the idea of handling a murder case, but he does it anyway. He takes the strange advice from the sheep, the books that they give him, and he learns and he applies that to this case in order to properly serve George after he had been murdered. Even his daughter, once she inherits the farm and $30 million, which is pretty nice to inherit, could I inherit that? That'd be nice. But even his daughter, after inheriting the farm, honors his memory by taking care of the sheep, by choosing to follow in her father's footsteps, even including more sheep as part of their flock. Why? Because she chooses to take it upon herself and be courageous with her actions. And for a kids' movie, this is a fantastic lesson for children to take away. Though it is not too heavy-handed, and some people may leave this movie not really getting that message, it is there. And I truly believe it is a great message for all children to hear. That being said, the movie is pretty immature. It is a little bit hard to get through just because these sheep are wildly immature. They are so sheltered. And the hardships of life are not touched upon in a way that truly showcase how much these sheep have grown. But no matter what, these sheep have grown tremendously from where they started. And to be honest, it does feel like a movie that introduces the topic of grief to many people who may have never even experienced this in their life. That being said, it does not dive too heavily in grief and it keeps it very light, which to me is a little bit of a detriment because I would have liked a little bit more seriousness when it comes to the nature of the things happening in the movie, but I understand that they wanted to keep it really light. And I know as a kids movie, it is a wonderful movie. It is super light, it doesn't go too dark, but oftentimes when you go a little bit darker, you can explore these themes very well and leave the audience feeling that they've really grown with the characters. Whereas for me, I felt that these characters started to grow, but man, they were so immature to the point where I really think that they are still immature by the end of the movie, but they're on the right track to become proper sheep, whatever that means exactly. Because grief and losing people is a topic that everyone's going to have to deal with in their life. And the idea that sheep turn into clouds may be a nice, whimsical thought, but it is not the reality. And the unfortunate reality is we're all going to experience grief one way or another. And that is the true heart of this movie about learning to be courageous even when life wants to make you uncomfortable. And so many people just don't want to be uncomfortable. But being uncomfortable is how we grow. And there is no more self-loving thing to do than to let yourself grow. But enough about what I thought about the sheep detectives. I want to hear what you all think about it down in the comments. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions about it? Let me know, and if you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. As always, check the links in the description for my main video essay channel and my Patreon to support the channel and recommend media for me to review next. Thank you to all my current Patreon members whose memberships help keep this channel afloat. I am so grateful you are all here with me. But that is all for now. Thank you, and I'll see you all in the next video.